Okay, let's unpack this. We often talk about disruptive technologies, but what about disruptive foundations?
Exactly.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into a paper that doesn't just suggest a little reform. It's proposing a fundamental reordering of how we educate.
A total reordering.
We're looking at research from the Human and AI Learning Institute, that's HALE, and they've basically challenged the entire structure of modern education as we know it.
It's a massive claim. And, the core thesis they present is deliberately provocative.
Right.
Hale is arguing that classical spiritual education has to serve as the prerequisite foundation for classical scientific education.
So you're saying flip the whole thing upside down.
Completely upside down from the typical, post-Enlightenment curriculum model.
Okay, before we dive into the flip, let's define what we're actually flipping. When you look at school today, K-12, what is it built on? What's the foundation now?
It's overwhelmingly built on what the Hale paper calls human knowledge.
And what does that mean in practice?
In practice, that means a focus on empirical science, on rational inquiry, technical skills, history. The things we can quantify and observe.
And that foundation has been incredibly productive. I mean, you can't deny that.
Oh, absolutely not. The last 2 centuries are defined by the explosive progress driven by exactly that foundation: medicine, tech, connectivity.
So, why the urgent call to tear it all down and rebuild? What's the problem?
The problem, according to the paper, is that this foundation, when it's the only guiding principle, when it's divorced from any kind of ethical guidance.
It's an engine without a steering wheel.
That's a great way to put it. An engine without a moral compass. Hale isn't saying human knowledge is bad. They're arguing it is insufficient as a foundation.
So where do we see this failure playing out? What are the big examples they point to?
Well, they cite major societal and environmental crises. So think about environmental degradation, for instance.
Right.
That's our mastery of chemistry and engineering, but applied without any reverence for the planet. Or profound global inequity, where incredible technical skills are just used for narrow, self-interested economic goals.
And I'd imagine things like AI and advanced weaponry fit in there too.
That's maybe the most disturbing one they mention. Our technologies hold this destructive potential that it far exceeds our ethical capacity to manage them. The knowledge is there, but the wisdom is missing.
Okay, so that sets our mission for this deep dive. We need to unpack this whole alternative foundation. We'll look at its scriptural origins, its surprising alignment with developmental psychology, and the practical safeguards it tries to build.
Right, because those safeguards are critical.
Let's start with this central replacement. What exactly are they proposing we build this new educational house on?
They're proposing a foundation rooted in what they call God's knowledge or revelation. And to be clear, Hale is drawing on source materials that ground this knowledge in spiritual revelation. So that's the essential shift. You're moving the base layer from what humanity discovers on its own,
human knowledge,
to what is revealed to humanity, divine knowledge.
Okay, we have to pause there and really define those two terms, because human knowledge, we get that. It's cumulative, you can test it, it changes.
It's fallible.
Exactly. So what is the nature of this divine knowledge as they define it?
The paper defines it as knowledge that's revealed through what they call manifestations of God. So we're talking about the founders of the world's major religions.
It's not data.
It's not empirical data, no. It's timeless moral and spiritual principles. So while human knowledge is constantly changing with every new discovery, this divine knowledge is presented as the fixed ethical compass. It's the standard.
The standard by which you judge the application of the human knowledge. But doesn't that, it sounds like you're setting up one system that's fallible and self-correcting science and another that's infallible and foundational. Doesn't putting an infallible source first risk, stifling the skepticism that science needs to work?
That is the central tension, isn't it? And the paper really tries to address it. They argue that the skepticism is still crucial, but you apply it to the material world, not to the ethical framework. Their argument is if your foundation is only built on fallible human reason, the whole thing can just collapse into moral relativism. The purpose of the spiritual foundation is to give you permanent, non-negotiable moral goals like unity, justice, service, before the child gets the tools, the science, to act on the world.
And the paper actually grounds this in specific texts. I saw they cite Bahá'u'lláh, saying schools must first train children in religion. So this isn't just a modern philosophical idea.
Not at all. They're saying the source material demands this sequencing, but and this is critical, they immediately introduce a huge caveat,
Safeguard.
a vital safeguard. The instruction must be provided, and I'm quoting here, in such a measure that it may not injure the children by resulting in ignorant fanaticism and bigotry.
Okay, so it's a very clear warning against dogma.
An explicit warning. It's a call for an ethical frame for reverence, but actively against rigid, divisive doctrine.
And to really nail down the difference between the two knowledge types, the source brings in a distinction from Abdu'l-Bahá.
Yes, and his distinction is perfect for a modern mind. He separates things perceptible to the senses, that's our human knowledge, the world of science and measurement.
What you can see and touch.
Right. And then there are things that are beyond the reach of the senses. That's the divine knowledge. The transcendent moral understanding, love, awe, the spiritual truths that give purpose to the material stuff. They're just addressing two totally separate spheres of reality.
Okay, so if this spiritual training has to come first, the question isn't just what, it's when and how. And this is where it gets really interesting, because Hale connects this directly to developmental psychology.
Yes, and what's so fascinating is that the timing isn't just a theological preference. They argue it's developmentally necessary.
How so?
Research actually confirms that early childhood, specifically the years between 3 and 6, is the critical window for moral and spiritual formation. It's when the brain's pathways for empathy, sharing, self-control, they're at their most pliable.
3 to 6 years old. That is an incredibly short window. And in most curricula, that's pre-K kindergarten, it's focused on letters and numbers.
Exactly. The paper argues we are missing the single most critical opportunity we have. In that window, the focus should be on building capacities like awe, empathy, virtue. It's about establishing lifelong resilience and ethical orientation.
So for a 3-year-old, that might mean, looking at patterns on a leaf instead of doing flashcards.
That's a perfect example. Understanding that they're part of a vast ordered system, it's building character before you teach calculus.
You build the character, then you give them the tools. Okay? But we have to tackle the elephant in the room here.
Indoctrination.
Indoctrination. History is just littered with examples of early religious training leading directly to the bigotry and fanaticism the paper warns against. So if you mandate this, how do you stop it from becoming the very thing that has historically torn humanity apart?
This is probably the most crucial section of the Hale paper. They know they have to inoculate the system against this exact risk, and they lay out 3 principles that have to strictly govern this education. They are non-negotiable.
Okay, lay them out for us. Let's see if they hold up.
First, the system must encourage inquiry alongside reverence. The child is taught respect for spiritual truths, but is actively encouraged to question, to explore, to think critically about how they apply. It's not blind submission.
It's thoughtful engagement.
Yes.
Okay, so inquiry is the first line of defense. It keeps the door open for reason. What about the social aspect?
Second, the instruction has to strongly emphasize inclusivity and the unity of humanity. So if any spiritual principle or practice divides children along ethnic or national or religious lines, it's considered a failure of the objective. The foundation has to unite, not fracture.
That deals with division. But what about that feeling of absolute certainty that so often leads to oppression?
That is the third principle, and maybe the most powerful one, humility. The spiritual education must teach humility by making it crystal clear that no one person, no single religious system has full, absolute, or final access to divine truth.
So the journey is ongoing.
The journey of understanding is always ongoing. And that, right there, prevents the spiritual foundation from becoming self-righteous or intellectually absolute.
You know, that third point, teaching radical humility, that feels like the key structural element. It separates this from historical religious schooling. It creates the intellectual space for science to come in later without just clashing.
It does. The spiritual foundation becomes a compass, not a map that claims to be the final destination.
Exactly. If you teach that truth is immense, and we only have a partial grasp of it, then the rigorous pursuit of human knowledge, of science, becomes a necessary act of service, not a threat to your certainty.
Investing.
Okay. So let's say that foundation is set in those early years, 3 to 6. How does the system then bring in classical scientific education? What does that integration look like when a child hits, say, age 7?
Well, the scientific and technical education is introduced after those spiritual roots are firm. So the child's natural curiosity, which is now, guided by this ethical orientation, can be put to responsible use. And it's not like a sequential handoff, it's an ongoing integration.
So what are the benefits of that integration? If you merge these two systems, what does spirituality give to science, and what does science give back to spirituality?
The benefits are profoundly synergistic. Spirituality provides guidance. It directs science and technology towards service, human dignity, sustainable progress.
And the other way.
Science, in turn, provides an essential balance. It grounds spirituality in reality. It actively prevents it from falling into superstition or, unproductive mysticism. They check and strengthen each other.
Let's try to make that practical. Imagine a student with this foundation who grows up to work on artificial intelligence. How would they approach developing a new AI algorithm differently?
That's a great question. A scientist rooted only in technical knowledge might focus on efficiency, speed, profit, the how.
Right.
A scientist rooted in this divine knowledge would focus first on the moral implications, the why. They design algorithms with built-in ethical safeguards from the very beginning. They'd want to ensure the tech actively promotes justice, not just maximizing output, which could, make existing biases even worse.
So the material result has to serve a moral purpose.
It's a requirement.
This holistic view really comes together when the source breaks down the ideal educated person into these simple parts. I found this very memorable. Hands, heart, and eyes.
It simplifies the whole complex curriculum perfectly, doesn't it? The hands represent the scientific education, the technical skill, our ability to act on the material world.
And the heart is the spiritual education.
It's our moral core, our source of empathy.
And the eyes tie it all together, which gets back to that humility we were talking about.
Exactly. The eyes are humility and vision. It's the self-awareness that our knowledge is limited, that we're always learning, and that the goal is service, not self-aggrandizement. The eyes make sure the hand is guided by the heart.
To really bring this all home, the paper uses a powerful analogy for this whole framework, the sequence, the integration, everything, by comparing the education system to a tree.
It's the perfect mnemonic device, really. If you picture the whole system as a tree, the roots are the spiritual education.
The prerequisite.
The prerequisite foundation, right, providing stability and nourishment during that critical early window.
So the trunk then has to be the integration, the ongoing balance between the two knowledge types throughout the rest of a person's schooling.
Correct. The trunk is that strong center where the guidance from the roots meets the application of the branches. It ensures healthy growth, and the branches.
That's the science.
That's the scientific education and all its applications stretching out into the world. It's the advancements and discoveries we make.
So the system grows from this immovable spiritual foundation, channels through the trunk of integration, and then applies itself through the branches of science. And the ultimate result of all this, the fruit of this tree.
The fruit is wisdom. And the paper defines wisdom very specifically as knowledge applied ethically for humanity's progress.
So it's not just having the skill, the branches, or the good intentions, the heart.
It's the successful and moral execution of those skills, all rooted in that foundational ethical framework.
This is a truly comprehensive reframing. It's a shift from just accumulating facts and skills to the systematic cultivation of ethical intelligence and capacity.
The central conclusion of Hale is that this structure aims for holistic progress. It's about making sure we advance materially, using science to solve our problems, but that this advancement is always tethered to that prerequisite foundation of ethical clarity.
Preserving unity and human dignity.
It's an advance that doesn't cost us our soul or our planet.
We've covered the framework, the timing, the ultimate goal laid out by the Human and AI Learning Institute. But this deep dive really leaves us with a provocative thought, one that builds directly on the source material.
It does. If we accept Hale's central finding that this critical, irreplaceable window for setting our moral and ethical foundations is between ages 3 and 6, well, that raises a huge and immediate question for society. Given that our current public policies often delay any kind of formal, structured ethical development until much, much later, how might our community structures, our parental support systems, and even our global public policies need to dramatically shift to accommodate this, to prioritize and protect this foundational reordering?
So if the roots have to be set by age 6,
What must the whole community do right now to cultivate that soil?